Hello and welcome back once again to the show. My name's Relevant. This is Do All the Things, and we return with the SLO build. Oh yeah, let us continue. Now, where we last left off, I had done a whole bunch of work back here, and while you weren't paying attention, I actually did some more work. The back trunk here is getting rather involved, and I'm going a little bit nuts with the zap straps, but hey, I'm not building this to look pretty. I'm building this to work well. Some people online, I've seen some SLO builds, they're just so pretty. Too bad they're done wrong if they're following that design. Here, this guy is going to be robust. It is, these trunks are assembled in such a way it feels like one solid mass. They're not moving anywhere. Over here by the tube sockets, I got those already. I got the heaters ran. It was a pain in the arse to coil these nice cable that I bought. I had to use a heat gun to help form them. But you want to mind the phasing. So far my phasing is following the circuit diagram, which I'm agreeing with. You want the phasing of the heaters to be the same across these two sockets, because these two tubes are out of phase with each other, which means any 60 cycle hum the heaters induce into one tube can get canceled out in the other, assuming you put the same side of the heater on the same pin. You're going to notice that I'm not doing the pretty bus bar like most builds do. That's because that's wrong. According to my understanding of amp building and design, you want to wrap your heater wires in a coil like this. What happens is there's some form of induction that happens in that helical pattern that allows hum from one side to cancel out hum from the other side. Apparently that's the quietest way to do it, and amp design's been doing that for years. So for that reason, starting to get the heater runs ready for the preamp tubes, I'm going to be going with the coil. Got some linkages ready to go for when I'm ready to put those into place. Various signal switching wires bundled together and ready to go. I've gotten the foot switch ready to go, which is not in the diagram. They show the connection of the foot switch, but not the connection of the switch itself on the front. I think the Mark 1, you needed to use a foot switch. It didn't have a manual switch on it. So on the finger of this jack, so that it gets bypassed when you plug into the foot switch, it runs to the front, and we've got it ready to hook up to the switch later. The tube sockets are all finished wired up. We got our screen grid resistors in place. The schematic and the parts I got are 500 ohm, but it's not the 1960s anymore. We know we want 1Ks in here. These are 1K 3 watt wire wound resistors, and from my experience, 3 watts is enough for this kind of design. I have seen some amps burn up 3 watts, or was it 2 watts on me? I have amps that I've run with 1 watts for the longest time, and they've been fine. So I'm gonna have to torture test. According to my math, these should be good. And then, current sense resistors in place. Used a little bit of artistic license, using the connectors here as actual terminals, so it looks nicer this way. But it looks busy right now, and that's pretty much the way it is. There's a lot going on here, but can't be helped. The main board is still loose and not hooked up. We aren't quite ready to do that yet, but we have most of our rear connections ready to go. The foot switch is going to come over here. Blue and red is the power for the switching circuits. It's going to go here, and then black and green is for the bias adjustment. It's going to go into there, hooking up to the knob over here. Black goes to the ground side of the adjustment knob, which is attached to this resistor. Which way you orientate the bias pot isn't really important. It's going to work well either way. It's just whether or not you fuss about your righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. I'm trying to orient it so that you increase the current as you turn it up, turn it clockwise like you would typically a knob. I found another ground problem in the schematic, in the layout. Something else that's done wrong. We have a ground point here, grounding to the chassis here, linked over here, and then we're grounded to the chassis on the effects loop, and we're grounded to the chassis on the input side, and all these are linked via a main bus going through the board. So to reiterate something I pointed out in the first video, the grounding scheme on this this layout is all messed up. You're gonna create about 3 or 4 ground loops for yourself, especially if you use the cheap chassis mounted jacks that that was provided to me, the metal ones. So to solve this problem, I've switched out to the plastic isolated jacks for both the input and the effects loop. That's going to eliminate those ground loops. But then we have the presence knob here, and then we have this ground bus that goes all the way along here to the input jack. And that is a fine place to ground buzz the input gain knobs. But the presence, no, that's bad. Here's why. So seeing here on the schematic, we have the preamp circuit, and we have the first ground plane here coming off the input jack, going all the way. This schematic is drawn incorrectly in the sense that there's a ground lug here. Realistically, the way the actual circuit board is, this ground lug is over here. And this kind of brings on a point that a schematic is like a recipe, and you can blindly follow it and get something that tastes okay, tastes good, but if you want it to be as good as the author intended, you have to kind of be a chef already and know your cooking fundamentals. So sometimes where these are representative is not necessarily where they should be. If we drew the schematic according to the wiring diagram, we'd have a lug up here, and then we'd have another lug back over here, and then you'd see there's obvious ground loops. But then you see over here, this chunk of the schematic, which is part of the power amp circuit, this is where the presence is. This is where the master volumes are. This is where the EQ is, and it's on a separate ground lug here. The way this wiring diagram is laid out disconnects this ground from here and attaches it to the front over here. Now we have our ground to the power supply over here. So what happens in this layout is it's forcing the presence circuit to pull its signal all the way past the preamp, past all the initial stages to get its power over here. Now, if you hook some sort of signal source up to, this general area, you're gonna see an audio signal. The presence knob is the ground to power the whole phase inverter circuit. So as the phase inverter circuit is working, it's going to be agitating across this ground lug. So we're going to take the audio signal that the phase inverter is generating, and we're going to drag it past all the super sensitive first stages, all through the preamp to get its power. And it's no wonder that other technician that I met, who's got way more experience than me, says the SLO clones he's witnessed have been noisy. I am now starting to see why. That is not where we ground phase inverter. It's easy to be fooled because the way this layout looks consistent with how other amps are laid out. If we take a quick look at a Seriatone layout for the Jubilee, we have our ground connection to the input. Then it grounds out to an initial position here. And then we do have a ground bus bar going all the way down and then here. But what you have to understand about this ground bus bar is you can see other components are grounded to perspective points along the bus bar. So like the presence pot is grounded near the end of the bus bar in closer proximity to where that circuit is located. We do not have all these guys bussed together separately from this bus and then connected at the front, forcing features like the presence that are at the back of the circuit to have to travel all the way around to the front of the circuit, then go to the back of the circuit. It's just, I'm sorry, whoever drew this doesn't it's a good hobbyist effort. It's something I probably would have done about 15 years ago and said, wow, yeah, I did a good job here, but So anyway, how are we fixing this? So right here is the ground wire coming off the power supply board, and you're going to notice I've kind of bent it. It is going to go to the presence knob, or maybe one of these knobs. We have the presence, we have the master volumes. It's going to connect over here. Then I'm going to make a bus with the presence, with the master volumes, with the EQs, attaching them together as they are in the circuit here in a separate ground plane from the preamp. And then from there, then I'm going to have the wire return and go to the back of the main board. That will put this circuit in correct proximity. It will put the circuit where it belongs. Because this 4.7K resistor is on the board. In order for the presence to access its own damn resistor circuit and capacitor, it's got to do this whole huge loop-de-loop and interfere with the rest of the system. So that's going to solve that problem. This is the perspective back of the main board where the ground's going to attach over here, and then everything's going to flow normally. So as a visual, I'm doing that in lieu of having this ground wire directly connect. It's going to go over here, then it's going to come here. So we're going to start by acquiring some of the off-board components. This special isolated baggie here, and these go attaching, like we got this cluster switch network here, which I think I need to bust out the multimeter and do some tests to make sure that that's done right, because it shows us how to hook up the switches exactly. I kind of want to make sure the switch positions are going to match the functionality. Down is clean, up is crunch. So we hook up our multimeter and do an impedance test to find out which position is on and off, because it's never the same. Okay, they're opposing. So the positions that are on are opposite to the position of the switch itself. So right now it's set to crunch mode. And of course it doesn't say frig all in the schematic which position's clean and crunch. We have a slightly more detailed Rob Robinette schematic here. Yeah, he explains it here. The attenuator gives us the clean, so. Yeah, sure enough, it looks consistent. What it says going on here looks like it would be in the general switch positions that are represented here. So that means I can go ahead and start wiring this as it says on the schematic, and it should work fine. Well, we got that front switching all hooked up, but it's actually right simple unless you want it to look pretty. I kind of want to split the difference, you know, I don't want it to look ugly, but diminishing gains. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the input jack now, which I might want to reorientate. Oh, we're starting to move down the line with a ground bus here. We have our first shielded connection. Well, it's one pot hooked up. The tool's falling down. This fresh stripped wire puts the little pip of solder on the end. Now we have a situation here where it's telling us to take a piece of shielded cable and then connect it to a resistor and have a floating resistor. I don't like floating resistors. They do not instill confidence. So I want some sort of terminal strip to buffer that. But like, this resistor will directly reach pretty much from the pot in methods of old school point-to-point wiring, which is something I might have considered doing to my own amps, but I don't know if I want to do that to an amp I'm building for someone else. Really though. Like look, it's totally gonna reach. That's so tempting. What I'm actually gonna have to do is put a terminal strip. Wish kind of would sit right about here, but I don't want to put another hole in his chassis. Oh, what's that loosening? Oh, we stripped out this little bolt, didn't we? Because it's a piece of Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, we're setting ourselves back. You know, this guy used some cheap ass hardware on some of these things. We got some spare 632s here, which will barely fit through that hole. Alright, we're gonna be busting out the rivet gun, bud. No, 632 will work. It'll work just fine. Alright, such a small snippet of shield cable. And we kind of have to leave this loose because I got other things that I have to connect here. Like the wire that's gonna go to the PC board. Might have been a bit premature for this particular attachment. Ah, there we go. Terminal strip, no floating connection. We gotta do something like that here for this 68K that's coming off the input jack, which maybe I'm ready to do now. It's just, there's certain wild cards because the board's not in place, so. Learning from our mistakes of the past, we're replacing this cheap screw with a 632 so we can get some nice torque on there. We're installing another terminal strip in here, right there. We start off by stripping back the shielded cable and then forming the two halves. We need to strip off the white part so there's something to connect to. I want to give the shield part a little bit of a tin because it's very flaky. And because it's uneven, we need to cut back a bit of it. And we figure out how much we're going to need. Total length probably about this much here. Snip that off. Strip off white section again. Then instead of twisting it all together, in some cases, we'll just peel it back. You can cut it off if you want it. Then we need some heat shrink, enough to cover the folded back section. Slip it on over top so that we have white section peeping out. Shrink it on there. Then you have a nice piece of shielded wire. And only one end is grounded because you're just trying to protect the signal. We're not actually using this to pass ground. Well, our input jack wiring is complete. We got our 1 meg ground. This side here is the main connector side. That's ground, that's tip. The 1 meg connects a ground leak from the ground to the tip, and then it crosses over the lead from the 1 meg over to the finger on the tip side. That grounds out the connection when we pull the jack out. And then this black wire here is the ground bus that goes out to the gain pots, and then this one's going to go to the PCB. And of course, well, that's going to go to our tube. We can tighten this down now. She ain't moving again. My thing is, this guy is coming over to this terminal lug here, which we're going to use to connect our bog standard 68K grid stop to pin 7. Used to be Monsieur grid stopper was, you know, located over on the jack, but they found it's best to stick it as close to the tube as possible. The slight bit of RC network it forms will filter out interference. Further cranking out the hits on the other side of the chassis, we've got the effects loop jacks connected. And they kind of, again, this is another position where they do something kind of wrong. Right, so we got the finger on the send disconnecting signal to the return. That's kind of not how it's done, because the send is optionally used as a preamp out. Where you still want the amp to run, you can plug that into a power amp, slave amp, something to that effect. So that gets connected directly, and then it passes through to the finger on the return, because if you plug into the return, that's where you might be using the amp as a slave or want it directly ejected to the power section, so that's on the finger. Also, oh, look at that ground loop. Now imagine you had 20 feet of cable connected to this. You'd have a nice nasty ground loop, wouldn't you? Now, seeing here, it's hard to illustrate, but the send is connected to the finger of the return here, so it's going to directly pass through, but then it's also going to the actual send jack, so we will get signal there. Now, of course, we have our 1 meg grid leak there to run the tube, but if you look down there, can you see it? It's like if you blink, you miss it. I'm trying to get you a shot of it. Oh, there it is. You can kind of see it. That little blue knobby right there. So that guy's a 10 ohm resistor. So what's going on with this guy is we've joined the grounds of the shielded cable together on the return. Now, only one side of the shielded cable is grounded. It's going to be grounded to the PCB, so we can get ground signal over here. Ground is not connected here where the return connects to the tube, so that's no ground loop. But that 10 ohm resistor is on the ground side of the send. So our ground signal is joining on the return, then it goes to that 10 ohm resistor, then connects to the ring of the send. What that does is it breaks the ground loop on the send. Now the 10 ohm resistor, this is a trick that other amps and amp manufacturers use. I've seen it in the Jubilee, I've seen it in the Friedman, and it's always on the send to break that ground loop. The idea is 10 ohms is so low impedance, it's transparent to an active audio signal. The tubes driving the circuit have no problem pushing signal through that resistor. However, it's high enough impedance, it breaks the ground loop in such a way that it's not going to be able to allow interference to pass. It's not going to turn that loop into an antenna. So, you know, this is a further improvement on this design. So seeing here, we've pretty much finished on our front panel wiring. The EQ's pretty much ready, I'd like to say. Now, it's not as pretty as some of the other work, because at this point we have normal wires doing normal wired things. You know, I lay it out nice, but that's about the diminishing gains I'm going to put into it. They're not particularly going to flop around or risk coming loose. We've established a ground bus here to the presence knob, which isn't soldered into place yet. I'm going to do that later once I'm ready to officiate these ground lines. But we are getting dangerously close to being ready to finally splice in the main board. And you know, the workbench looks like it's exploded at this point. Can't be helped. Well, buds, I think I've gone and done it. I think I've done about all I can do in here. It's time to start stitching in the main board. Like, I'm gonna wait for the heaters, the AC heaters, until I've gotten all little wires into place, or at least until I know how the wiring's gonna go. I've done the DC heaters. I got some of those self-adhesive dealies there that aren't always ideal. I imagine the adhesive's gonna wear out after a while, but hopefully by then the wires have trained themselves to stay into place. Meantime, it's gonna keep this DC heater line away from signal lines and away from the AC heater lines, because I don't want any induction from the AC heater lines to get into the DC heater. AC, DC. Now, one of the first things I gotta start doing is getting these rear wires stitched in there and piloted in. That's gonna consist of some flippy uppy backy forthy. And then the send wire. That'll be interesting. So, the general idea is I want these all to be about the same length. Those wires look like they're gonna be good. Oh, our B plus and our bias. You know, I never got a straight answer on why they call it B+. It's like, is there an A+? Is that AC mains is the A+? Is that how it works? So these all look good. They're all spaced roughly the way I want them to be. I need to connect the, whatchamacallit, the screen grids for the big tubes. Now, the schematic here is asking you to attach them to wires and then kind of hover them, but I don't play that way, and these connections are all so close together, I don't think that's necessary. I've gone and started to form fit these things, and the resistors are gonna reach directly from the contacts on the board to the tubes. Just use some heat shrink to turn them into virtual wires. Gonna clamp them down, just like that, and tack her in. I'm gonna go ahead put heat shrink on the other lines here until I know exactly how they're gonna be routed, just to get it ready. All right, so the plan I have is I'm going to affix the rear wires, and then I'm hoping I'm gonna be able to get the wires in underneath the board from the front. So that's gonna be fun. I should solder them in place now. I really should. Yeah, and just slack them. That's what it's gonna boil down to. Even though I hate wasting. Now the schematic here, or the layout, all has them roughly color coded. I guess I could stick with that color code, except I've used plenty of red. So the blue are the negative cathodes, reds are the anodes. Yeah, okay. Greens are grids. Could have a lot of little wasted bits of wire we are. I cut these all longer than I think they need them to be. V28, V33. I'm starting to get a feel for the nomenclature here. Every tube has a cathode. I think we can all agree on that. All right, do I want to use red for the anodes and greens for the grids? Kind of need to look at what's left of my wire stock. Oh boy, I'm almost out of black. I'm gonna have to order more wire. White for anodes. Green for grid. Anodes, grids, and cathodes. Yeah, all right. Sharing color codes again. Treble will be yellow. Oh, kind of got to make this guy extra long. Mid will be blue. The other treble will be white. There's that main ground. OD gain there is shielded. Red is going to be OD master volume. It's got to kind of go that way. So we'll use white for normal master volume. Candy cane. I think I got these all connected now. I just have to get my shielded cables into place. CR switch. So that's going to be clean switch. In the manual, it shows it as a normal cable, but I believe it should be a shielded cable. They even have a little spot for it. So I'm going to try this technique that I have in mind. Basically, I take this, try to peel it back as best as I can, and I poke this guy through the hole. I believe I should be able to get a shield through the hole. They look about the right size. Yeah. This might melt on that cable a bit, but I'm hoping I can solder that shield into the hole. Yeah, looks like it. If I can just strip this back a bit, just the slightest whiff of tinning on the end. So we can now guide this back down like that. There you go. So the shield, you know, there's holes, right, for the shield. So I poke the wire through. I pull the shield back. I solder the shielding directly onto the hole, if you can see. Melts a little bit of the insulation, but that's fine. And then double it back around, and there is my connection. Now I just need to do that a couple more times. Now the OD gain, I'm going to spike in the top coming from the pot. And the pot is where the shielding is going to be grounded, so we don't have to worry about that trick here. Or, you know what, it's on the edge. I'll fish it in from the bottom. The V77's all the way over here. They have a screen connection at the back, so I guess they intend you to come in from the bottom. Well, that screen connection is the send that I need to do before I put this guy down. Oh boy. I'm going to start getting the nylon washers into place. All right. We need to like put this like this or something. Need to get this screen wire into place. This is gonna be fun. Careful now. Get in your hole. As long as the center insulation stayed intact, that's gonna be good. Kind of made a hot mess here though. Whatever, we'll just make it nice. Okay, I kind of butchered this particular screen connection, but it's gonna be okay. We just now have to get these wires into place. Let us connect the foot switch. Let us connect the power for the foot switch, channel switching. Oh, this is getting tricky now. Oh, now the bias control. Nothing's sacred now. We're just going haywire. Just going haywire. This ship in the bottle just... Problem is all these guys need to come out this way. B+ going in. We need a ground wire. So let's get our black spool. Need to get that ready. And finally, bias. I'm talking like you guys are watching me in real time, but you're not. I think everything on this board is connected now. Oh, we have an OD gain wire. That comes into the top, and then we have this ground wire. I'll do that after also. So we got a couple things that need to connect after, but in theory, we can get all these wires up and out of the way, cooperating. We should be able to drop this board down. Except we have a little wire holder that I want to get into here. Ugh, there's some springiness. It's not fitting nice. Oh, I forgot to connect this send wire. Frickin' haywire, bud. Frickin' haywire. Ugh, upside down and backwards. Huh. Oh boy. Oh boy. Look at all these guys. Yeah. So what's next? What is next? There are a couple connections here that I meant to do after the fact. One of them is the OD gain shielded wire. And I'm hoping, well, no, I'm gonna have to lift this board up, I think. I have to go under these heater wires, up and over. Come on. No way I would have been able to do this how I was originally planning on doing this. Pretty sure though, I can solder a wire from the top. Should be in there now. Oh yeah. And there's a ground wire here. Already determined length. Yeah, she's good. All the way over here, there's a depth wire and a presence wire hiding underneath the board that I should probably get now because I feel like we're going to reach the threshold of me being able to take this board back off again. I'll make presence white. My presence be known. Depth return's gonna be yellow. It's like freaking parting the seas here, bud. And I want these wires to go through this wire holder. And I need to extend this wire here, coming off the feedback that fell too short because schematic did not accurately tell me about the depth knob. Oh boy. I think I'm good to go ahead and connect this. Presence return. And I'm officially soldering on the presence knob now. The depth isn't laid out. I gotta look at the schematic and interpret the orientation. I'm not quite sure of the orientation here. So what's depth here? I think turning it this way forces more to go through there, is gonna give us more low end. So plus is this side of the pot. And according to the schematic, there's nothing on the plus side. So centers in from power amp. That should return back to the board via the yellow wire. Now the depth knob has a capacitor that has to tack on there. A 472J, yeah, that appears to be the depth. 4.7N. Now I just have this ground bus, but I kind of am saving this for the end. This guy though, I guess I could run this guy, or can I? I gotta tack it all back friggin' in here. I need to release this strap. Well, this is looking like a hairy mess. Oh yeah. And I just about got the presence connected, but then this wire fell short. For some reason, I don't know what happened. There was like 2 inches of insulation, but no wire underneath, unless I accidentally snapped off the wire trying to strip it. I don't know, but I'm gonna have to attach a new wire to the power supply board, which half sucks, but can't be helped. Anyway, that's enough for today. Because it's late now, and yeah, there's still several more hours of surgery to go here, so you best stay tuned. The what I'm gonna call ultimate Soldano build, Soldano clone build, because, you know, based on what I'm seeing here and the improvements I have made here, unless someone else who's cloned this have picked up on these deficiencies and put them in here, I might almost be arrogant enough to say that this is probably the best Soldano clone. Well, that is assuming I turn this thing on and everything works as it should, but hey, stay tuned and find out.